receive of you telling us how you were encouraged from the struggle is over. I decided to ask God to give me another word of encouragement to encourage his people. So I got some more young people. Bonafide praises. Let's encourage someone. Listen.
Things may not be looking up.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Put a smile on your face.
Hold your head up high. It's gonna be a brighter day. All things work together.
That's word, y'all.
For good to them that love God. Whatever the situation, he will work it out.
Say it again.
Whatever the situation,
he will
work it out.
I'm a living witness that he will.
He will
work it out.
Work it out. I know he will. He will
work it out.
Work it out.
I came to let you know that he will.
He will
work it out.
Work it out. I know he will.
He will.
He will
work it out.
Work it.
Seek justice. That's the command we have to follow. Defend the orphan. That's the assignment of the season. That is the call. And it's upon us all to learn to do good. God wants righteousness and justice. He wants us to stand against all evil and oppression. He wants us to fight what we know is right. We will obey. Listen, we're all tired, hoping and praying. We're so tired of waiting on other people to change. We stand together for justice, and we raise our voices. This is what I want you to say. And even if it's just us, still enough of us, we gon' change the world. We gon' change the world. Listen, seek purpose.
Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the Mount. We are very proud and humble. We're honored to be here at New Mount Olive Baptist Church to present to you a very, very important, very vital forum regarding jury duty and jury service. We call it jury duty, step up, and sit down. The sponsor, the people who put this together, are members of the National Bar Association Judicial Council. That is the Judicial Council, the arm, if you will, of the National Bar Association, which is the organization nationally and internationally of black lawyers. Judicial Council, obviously, being founded in Miami in 1971 at the behest of the National Bar Association president, suggesting that since we had a number of black judges that were being appointed throughout the nation, particularly on the federal bench, it was a necessity to have this arm of the National Bar Association, and again, it's called the Judicial Council. The members of the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association believe that our system of justice will only survive and keep the confidence and support of all segments of society when those responsible for its trust continue to be the main catalyst for constructive change. The focus is to maintain the integrity of the judiciary, maintain the integrity of the criminal and civil justice system, and maintaining the dignity and independence of the judiciary. And of course, the focus is increasing the numbers of black judges and judges of color, men and women, on the federal and state benches throughout the nation. So what you have are judges that are on now nationwide. You have on the agenda two of our judges. One is the chair of the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association. She's in Fulton County, Georgia, Atlanta. She sits on the Superior Court up in Fulton County. We also have the chair of our committee, actually the chair of the NBA. Let me say that because Kimberly will kill me. The chair of the NBA Judicial Council is Kimberly Esmond Adams, and you hear from her very shortly. At the conclusion, you hear from Judge Sharon Burrell, who sits on the Circuit Court, Montgomery County, Maryland. I thought that was Baltimore until she basically ragged me out and told me, nope, it's Rockville, Maryland. So you'll hear from her, and you'll hear also from this esteemed, very prominent bunch of panelists that we got to tell you and to teach you the value, the importance of the jury duty, and we'll get to them. They will introduce themselves momentarily. Welcome. That's my welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your significant others, and some brought their babies so they can have this experience. We will now have the invocation by Reverend Frank Kennedy Jr., who is executive pastor of this great church, the greatest church on this side of glory. Last time I said that, I was sitting in Pompano, and I said the greatest church on this side of, and I realized I was in Pompano. I said, outside of Pompano, and everybody cheered. So we'll have the executive pastor come on up, give us the invocation. Appreciate it.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you for the novelty of this moment. Moreover, we thank you for the wonder of this movement. We thank you for the gravid gift of our judicial system, and indeed we praise you for persons whom you've ordained to facilitate and mete out justice. We pray that our time Shared in your presence will be a time of fruitfulness. Indeed, bless our conversations. In the blessed name of Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Well, we're going to proceed on the agenda as written. We will have all of the panelists introduce themselves. They will take 30 seconds to do that. They will speak clearly into the mic so that everybody can hear them nationwide. We'll have the esteemed Broward County Clerk of Court, Brenda Foreman. We'll have Harold Pryor, the Broward County State Attorney, Gordon Weeks, the Broward County Public Defender, and they do get along very well. The Honorable Judge Tanya Brinkley from Miami-Dade County. She came up from Liberty City to my right. And the Honorable Mary Rudd Robinson, retired Broward County Judge. We'll have also at the end of the program something that you need to hear. Everybody needs to hear. And that is jury duty scams that are basically conducted in South Florida. And each of you need to know how to avoid being scammed. At this moment, we'll hear now the comments, presentation, introduction, if you will, of Judge Kimberly Esmond Adams.
Good evening. My name is Kimberly Esmond Adams, and I have the awesome privilege of serving as chair of the Judicial Council of the National Bar Association. It is my honor to welcome you this evening to our Jury Duty Community Forum, where we want to talk with members of the community about the importance of serving on juries. As all of us should know, citizens around the United States comprise juries that hear all types of matters, civil matters, criminal matters. These are the same citizens who also serve on grand juries. And we simply wanted to have an opportunity this evening to talk to the members of our community about why this type of public service is particularly important. There are cases that we see on the news every day. There are in situations involving police officers, situations involving private citizens, individuals in lawsuits, corporations, and we sometimes wonder how those decisions are reached. Those decisions quite often are reached when members of the community come together and serve as a jury panel to deliberate and decide the important issues of the day. And our position is, if you don't participate, then you don't have grounds to complain. And so we are excited to be able to share with you this wonderful panel of experts who serve across the legal profession, including judges, attorneys, prosecutors, and administrative professionals, who will this evening talk to you about why it is so critically important for members of our community to be engaged in this important process. I want to thank the New Mount Olive Baptist Church under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Marcus Davidson for opening up your church to us this evening to host this wonderful community forum. And I especially want to thank one of the members of the Judicial Council, Judge Michael Robinson, for coordinating this important forum and ensuring that we are, in fact, serving our communities as we sit in places of judgment across this country, trying to carry out the important oath and the solemn oath that we've taken to be the guardians of justice. So thank you for joining us. You can put on your seatbelts and be prepared for a wonderful forum. And we hope that you'll be engaged and ask questions. And at the end of all of this, we hope that you will become partners with us in sharing the importance of this civic duty that is jury service. Have a good evening and a wonderful program.
She said, fasten your seatbelts. I want you to relax. Take your shoes off. I want you to straighten up your weave. Men, just watch. If you ain't got no hair, don't worry about it. I want you to understand that we are the experts. We're going to talk to you. We're going to also ask the panelists questions. Write down something that you want asked of them. so that we can also, at the end, entertain questions that you may have. That's also inclusive of Broward Sheriff's Office. So we have judges here, we have judges in the back, we have judges around, judicial assistants, we have now the senior pastor of this great church, Marcus D. Davison. D is for dynamic. Reverend, appreciate you. Thanks for coming. Four objectives for tonight. First, we're going to educate the general public, and this is nationwide. Keep in mind, it's not just South Florida, Broward County. We're going to educate the general public about the rules and procedures exercised by the clerk of the courts or those officers throughout the nation whose responsibility it is to summon jurors to serve on our courts. I want to emphasize tonight the importance of serving on juries to our criminal and civil justice system. We want to empower you and encourage the citizens of this great nation to serve our justice system with information, tools, and resources provided by our esteemed panel of experts. And finally, as I stated earlier, we're going to warn you, the general public, about jury duty scams, fraud, and legalities throughout the system so that you can avoid those scams. We'll now start to my left. We're going to have the panelists introduce themselves briefly. You know them all. First, we'll start with the Honorable Brenda Foreman.
Good evening, everyone.
They can hear you.
I'm Brenda Foreman. I am your first African-American female to ever serve as the clerk of the court for Broward County from the time that I became the clerk in 2016. I have two of my employees here who are going to engage you in this discussion tonight because I always like to let my employees shine. Even though I try to stay in the background, people like to push me forward. But I love you guys to life. We have 22 divisions, and the jury department is one of those divisions that I oversee. There are 4 courthouses, there are 90 judges, 11 magistrates, and I have 585 employees. Over 1,000 duties that we have to do, plus, and the legislature is constantly changing a lot that we have to do almost on a daily basis. So being the clerk of the court, I love my job, I love what I do. I love doing what needs to be done for the community and having the community to reach out to us. And I have always made this statement, without the clerk of the courts, no one can do their jobs effectively. So once again, I'm Brenda Foreman. I am your Broward County Clerk of Courts. Thank you. Oh, and at the end, if you need any information, we do have brochures in reference to the jury administration.
Y'all can clap. I want y'all to clap for anybody that moves me out the way. We now have the Honorable Gordon Weeks, the Broward County Public Defender.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Thank you for this very important conversation. I think this is one of the first times in Broward County, at least in my experience, that we're having a conversation about jury service. And it's most appropriate to have this conversation in God's house. So I want to thank Reverend Dr. Davidson for allowing us to come into the Lord's house and have this incredibly important conversation. You know, as your public defender, you know, I'm responsible for being a counterbalance to the entire criminal justice system, to the incredible powers that are invested in judges, the awesome power that's invested in our state attorney, the role that law enforcement plays in the community. I'm here to make sure that we represent the Constitution, make sure it breathes each and every day, to make sure that those rights and privileges that we are granted are always maintained and held to the highest levels in our courts. So I appreciate this conversation about jury service because I remember many a days when I was picking juries. and having cases and wondered why the pool did not look like the community. Wondered why folks did not want to come down to the courthouse and serve. This is one of the most highest civic duties that we have in a civilized country, to serve in our armed forces, to be called and served in our jury, because this is your opportunity to give your voice as to what you believe your community is going to look like. So I welcome this conversation, I welcome the dialogue, and I really, really appreciate Judge Robinson and all those folks that put this on here today, because this is a most very much necessary conversation, because we need to have good folks in this community coming down and doing their part to make sure that justice happens in our community every day. So thank you.
Mr. Harold Pryor, the Broward County State Attorney.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Harold Pryor. I am your Broward County State Attorney. I am essentially the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in this county and the Chief Prosecuting Officer in this county. My office is responsible for prosecuting crimes ranging from misdemeanor offenses all the way to first-degree premeditated murder. I have an office of about 511 employees and 200-plus attorneys. I mirror the sentiments of Mr. Weeks and Madam Clerk Foreman. This is an important discussion. Oftentimes when we pick juries, we notice that there are a lot of people from our communities who show a lack or unwillingness to serve on juries. And I ran to reform our criminal justice system. And in order to do that, we need willing and able participants in the criminal justice system at every aspect and every juncture of the criminal justice system, and jury duty is that function. It's easy for us to complain about things not being done and the system not changing, but if you're not willing to be a willing and able participant in a constitutional right that you have, then the work that many of us are doing here, the work that many of the people in my office is doing, the work that many members of our law enforcement agencies and community activists are doing, it goes asunder. There's so many people that have died for the right for us to vote. There's so many people who died for the right for us to just serve on a jury. And oftentimes, you're going to hear from me. I'm the Chief Law Enforcement Officer in the county, and I'll tell you, we have a criminal justice system that treats people that look like me differently and unfairly. And a tool that we have is jury trial. I know Mr. Weeks will agree with that. It's an awesome tool because it holds me accountable. It holds law enforcement officers accountable. It holds our institutions accountable that have been traditionally stacked against people of color. But if we don't want to participate in this system, then things are going to continue the way that they are. And so I love that we're having this discussion. We're going to go into detail, some things that you all need to know, and we all need to make sure you know this information so you can better inform our communities as to what we're doing and why jury selection is one of the most utmost civic duties that one can perform as a citizen of the United States of America. So thank you all. I look forward to the discussion. God bless you all, and also thank you, Pastor Davidson, for hosting us. Thank you, Pastor Kennedy. Judge Robinson, thank you, sir, and thank you to TJ Redding Bar Association. I'm past president of that association. I love that association. They do the great work. And the Broward County Bar Association, Braulio Rosa, I saw him around there. He's committed to diversity and giving access to so many people, to some of the great services they offer with the Broward County Bar Association. Thank you so much.
We now have the Honorable Tanya Brinkley, Circuit Court Judge in Miami-Dade County.
Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you very much for having me here this evening. It really is an honor and a privilege to come here to Broward County. I serve Miami-Dade County, but as a judge, obviously, I feel that my role is to serve this country, and public service is certainly at my heart. So I want to certainly start by thanking the National Bar Association for putting this together, Judge Robinson for chairing this project and organizing us all and having us all here today. I serve as a circuit court judge in Miami and have been in that capacity for about 4 years now. And every single week, we are bringing jurors down, generally a panel of anywhere from 40 to 100, depending upon the charge, to decide whether someone who's charged with a crime is guilty or not. And the only thing that stands between that decision, as much as people think it's us because we wear the robe, it's the juries. The juries make that decision. And it has to be a unanimous decision. So we're going to talk about the nuances as we go through this process this evening. But when that jury is not diverse, and when I talk about diverse, I don't only mean diverse in race, diverse in ethnicity, diverse in income, diverse in experiences. It is very, very difficult to ensure that you have a verdict that not only the defendant feels confidence and faith in, but also the victims, because we talk about people of color, like myself, who are charged with crimes, but we also have people of color who are victims. And so when you don't have jurors that represent our community and that come from a broad range of experiences, of perspective, it really is difficult to ensure that there's confidence in the process. So we hope through this discussion, people will have more faith in the jury system. You'll feel more of a commitment to serve, and we welcome your service, and we know that the process only gets better through all of us working together. So thank you for having me.
The Honorable Mary Rudd Robinson, retired county court judge in Broward County.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Good. I'm Mary Rudd Robinson. I was a magistrate for 4.5 years, and I sat on the county bench for 27.5 years. When I retired, I was chairperson of the criminal division of the Broward County Court, and we were in trial every week, almost every day in county court, which is known as the People's Court. I'm extremely honored to be here this evening to speak with you, and I thank the National Bar Association for having this panel, for having this discussion, because this is needed information, and we want you to know, because we need you to step up and sit down as jurors. Thank you.
You've heard the purpose. You can feel the passion that each of these individuals have. You're here now about the processes that go into summoning and sending the jurors to the courtrooms. We'll now have Ms. Kathy Bernstein come forward and tell us about the clerk's office. And when we call Kathy, I ask her every week, every other week, send me 30, please send me 30. I beg, please send me 30. What you'll hear is that criminal court gets the preference, and then the civil court will get it. Before I bring her up, we ask you to do several things constitutional in this great nation. We ask you to pay taxes. We know how important that is to pay taxes. Thank you, amen. We also ask you to vote. We know how important that is for you to vote. There's no greater process, conduct, activity you can render this country than jury duty, except for military service. And they stopped drafting people for that. We don't subpoena you to vote. We know how important that is. We don't subpoena you to pay taxes. But if you don't pay taxes, you'll get subpoenaed. And we don't subpoena you, summon you for military service. But we have to do it for jury duty, because that is basically the fulcrum. That is the foundation of our democracy. That's how serious the writers, the founders of this nation felt about jury service. So don't take it lightly. we're very serious up here. Kathy.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Bernstein. I'm the jury manager of the Broward County Clerk of Courts. And my responsibility is to issue juror summonses to the residents of Broward County, and they're in my care and custody while they're there serving jury service. I then have those jurors assigned to various panels to various judges based on those requests. You're going to ask questions? Thank you.
Now, I'm asking the clerk questions, but Kathy's going to basically answer those questions. We have probably 13 years now of working together, so she knows what I'm going to ask her, and she has the answer. Tell the public, generally, now each state has its own laws, statutes. In Florida, we're not going to cover the statute, but it's statute number 40, Florida statute number 40. In that statute, it gives you qualifications, et cetera, and you're going to hear about that now. My first question, what are the qualifications and the process for a prospective juror to get on a panel in this circuit? You got to come up. They got to hear you.
I know. Sorry. The requisite qualifications: you must be 18 years of age or older, a citizen of the United States whose residence is in Broward County. You cannot be under prosecution of a crime or convicted of a felony unless your rights have been restored. Prospective jurors are those who possess a Florida driver's license or a state ID issued by the DHSMV. They are randomly summoned and must be notified 14 days in advance. They are randomly assigned to a panel when they report for jury service.
Our next question. How often can a juror be summoned in Florida?
In the state of Florida, for the circuit and county court, a juror can be summoned once a year.
We have the co-moderator has her children, and I'm very curious because I told her that we have some babysitters in the audience. She's already fed the baby and everything, and now she has her premier babysitter, her 10-year-old son, taking care of the baby. I'm gonna call my co-moderator up now. She is the president. Is it July 1? July 1. She's still president. Okay. President of the T.J. Rated Bar Association in Broward County. She will on Saturday. We have Ms. Randall's going to be president, and she's going to be the immediate past president, and she's welcoming that opportunity to get out of this office. Alexia Hudson. Ms. Hudson, come on up. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then she's going to take over the questioning of the panel. The panel will be allowed to answer any question being asked, and we'll allow for 5 minutes or so for the questions. And then once we finish those questions, we'll ask maybe 9 or 10 questions. Then we'll basically turn to you guys, and then we'll have BSO come up and tell you about this fraud and scam being operated. My question, first question, how important is it to our criminal and civil justice system for citizens to appear for jury duty, jury service? And we're going to start with we're going to come this way. Okay, Mr. Pryor.
All right. Well, I think all of us alluded to it earlier. It's important. We all know the history of this country and how, particularly criminal, I've had an opportunity to do civil and criminal, and we all know that there is a economic gap, right, or opportunity gap in every aspect or every institution in this country. And oftentimes when there are disputes against individuals or people or corporations, if you can't come to a resolution, what happens? You take it to trial. And oftentimes what we find is that when you go to trial, the reason why you go to trial is you want to be judged or you want to have the issue decided by a jury of your peers, people that reflect the community in which you live in. And so traditionally in this country, that right, that privilege was excluded. Black people, we didn't have an opportunity to participate in that, or we weren't allowed to participate in that. And so when you have issues in the criminal justice system that affects someone's liberty, the possibility of someone being imprisoned, right? Someone being taken away for a long time, that person, you would hope, they would hope that they would have a jury of their peers, people that could look at the case, look at it from a lens and hold law enforcement accountable, hold my office accountable, prosecutors, people that are bringing charges against them to ensure that their constitutional rights are being upheld. But also in the civil sense, when you're talking about money, when you're talking about property, you're talking about people's livelihoods, oftentimes you have employment dispute issues, right? You have issues surrounding personal injury. You have contractual issues in just corporations. Sometimes it could be that mom and pop shop that's black owned, right? And you have a contractual dispute because you're doing work at a former president's home and he's notorious for not paying his bills, right? And so you're a mom and pop organization and you bring a lawsuit against them. You want a diverse jury that reflects the community, that can identify, that can read between the lines and look at the facts and the evidence. So that's why jury duty is important and why we need maximum participation, because it allows us to participate in this experiment, one of the great experiments in American democracy, which is also an experiment. It's the right. It was a radical idea to allow someone to have a jury to make a decision, to make a determination by a jury of their peers. So it's important that we have a diverse jury pool that's reflective of our communities. And if it doesn't reflect our communities, then oftentimes the results aren't going to be great for people in those communities.
You know, I have to echo everything that State Attorney Pryor said, but I want to talk to a particular segment that oftentimes is overlooked. You know, their jury duty is important for those folks that have access to the system, folks that traditionally will utilize the system. They understand the importance of service on jury duty. Because let's first define what jury duty is. You are acting as the judge of the facts and the circumstances for which you are being brought there to consider. Now, what does that really mean? You know, we all look from a lens from the outside looking in, and we see that law enforcement have written a report. A victim may have made an allegation. A corporation may have committed a wrong. Who is going to determine what of the physical evidence that is being presented? And by pointing out strengths and weaknesses, we may identify that this person has a particular bias. They may have a particular unfavorable point of view, meaning that it was dark outside and they couldn't really see 12 blocks down the street. It was raining. They have glasses. Those are the skills of the attorney, to point out the issues that may affect somebody's perception of what occurred. Because the law enforcement officer has a very low standard. The state attorney has a different standard. But in order to find someone guilty, it's a very high standard, beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And who is that to make that determination? The jury. So you come to court and you listen and you do what you do in your everyday life. Some people say that it's sizing people up. Remember that? I'm going to size you up. I'm going to give you a good look. I'm going to put my eye on you and hear you. What you're doing to me right now. You're making an assessment as to whether I'm believable or not. That's your job as a juror. And whatever you come to in your soul and in your heart, based on the rules that are presented to you, is what the facts are going to be. And then you, along with what the facts are. And if you're able to agree one way or another, that's what occurred on that day. And that's the power of being a juror. You're more powerful than the judge. You're more powerful than the state attorney, the police officer, because you get to determine what happened. So we need people that are educated. We need folks that are tradesmen. We need folks that work with their hands. We need folks that are in school, that are unemployed. And you know, life experiences are very important to rely on in jury duty. We need everyone to participate because you're going to bring something special to that deliberation. And in that conversation, you're going to help shape what those facts are. So that's why it is incredibly important, it is incredibly vital that we have an incredible cross-section of our community participating in jury duty. Thank you.
Excellent responses, appreciate it. You have taken care of 4 of my other questions. We're going to, at this point, turn to the judges, but if we can, Isaiah, can you put up the first PowerPoint, page 2? The first PowerPoint, page 2. It says why jury service is important. Hopefully you all can see. All right. We're going to keep that up for now. And we're going to go to the judges, and then we're going to go according to the agenda and also other questions. We'll allow Ms. Hudson to ask the other questions of the panelists. All right, Judge Brinkley. Judge Brinkley.
The same question that was asked earlier? Yeah. So let me give a different perspective. I love the sort of foundation that our public defender in Broward County, Mr. Weeks, presented, but let me also put it in a very selfish way, right? So looking at the perspective of all of you who are here today as potential juror members. So we as lawyers by trade, spent 4 years in college, 3 years in law school. So in order to litigate, we've got 7 years of training in one way or another, certainly 3 years in law school that allow us to be able to present these cases, and then as judges to preside over these matters. But I think that many of us agree that unless we work in that system, we feel like outsiders, right? We know what we see on TV, we know what we read in the paper, and we know what we hear in our neighborhoods, in our churches, at restaurants, at family reunions, wherever we are that we gather, but we don't feel like we really have a say in the process. So you talk about what Mr. Weeks said in terms of how powerful the jury is. I want you to take it from a selfish perspective as well and understand that when you serve on a jury, it doesn't require any experience. It doesn't require any training. We require 2 things. One, that you come with an open, unbiased mind. That means without an agenda, right? So you're going to listen to the facts. You're going to judge the demeanor. As, again, Mr. Weeks said, are you going to size up the witnesses? So we talk about how do you judge someone's demeanor? Well, we all judge demeanors differently. Some people say, well, if you look at me, straighten my eyes, I trust you. If you look away, you don't. Others will say, well, you know what? I look away, and sometimes I laugh when I respond because I get a little nervous, but I'm telling the truth. So it really depends. And unless you are able to insert yourself in that experience as a juror, you cannot take advantage of the opportunity to learn from the process. We teach you about the Constitution. So I can tell you that once you have served on a jury, you are almost as good as many starting lawyers. You understand what the presumption is. And I've presided over domestic violence cases, county court cases, circuit cases, criminal and civil, and they do range. So in the domestic violence realm, we've seen many cases where you have victims who have been repeated victims of domestic violence, and they get tired of coming back and forth to court. They get tired in terms of the resolutions. And I remember one case in particular with a victim who had come in. She was working at Winn-Dixie, and this is sort of speaking to our topics here. She had been working at Winn-Dixie, had 2 jobs, 2 children at home, and she was a victim of domestic violence with her live-in lover. She came to court to testify. She came straight from work. Her Winn-Dixie uniform was a little tight, but it was tight probably because she was balancing everything. We know as women, as we get a little older and we're balancing our families and everything, we put on a little weight sometimes. And I remember at the conclusion of her trial, the jury acquitted the defendant, but not on the facts. They acquitted him because they didn't like that she came and testified in her Winn-Dixie uniform that was a little tight. And, you know, as Black women, we get a little round in certain places. They didn't think she was properly dressed. And for that, they acquitted the defendant. So I say that to say, if we are present in those rooms, we bring these experiences, we bring these perspectives. We've got a different way of looking at things, a different way of measuring up witnesses. We understand the slang when witnesses say things. I remember I had another case, and the witness was saying, yeah, I was with me and my mans. Well, I know that your mans means your boy. Other people in the courtroom thought that your mans meant your lover, your partner, right? So it's those things we bring. But again, on the flip side, it is your opportunity to learn about the law. It's your opportunity to be empowered. It is your opportunity to not look at TV, read the paper, or talk to your friends about the process and how it's not working. It's your chance to really, really get involved and understand how the system works and to be involved in change and good change. So that's why your service is important and we need you.
We're going to end this question with Judge Robinson, but then we're going to go with Judge Robinson first in terms of some of the exemptions that Ms. Bernstein told us about. So Ms. Robinson, answer the first question, and then we'll get to the exemptions.
Okay, I think that they have pretty much covered this question, but I think one of the big things about the importance of jury duty is when you think about how you would react or feel if you went into the courtroom as the defendant or as the person seeking redress and you didn't have an opportunity to have a jury reflect your community, or an opportunity to have somebody on the panel that looks like you, or an opportunity to have somebody on the panel who maybe was in a like position as you, or anything across the board. You want a jury reflective of your peers, it says, reflective of your community. So that is one reason, and a very important reason, of why jury duty is important. And they actually changed jury duty, the way they pick jurors, from voters registration. Years ago, when I first got on the bench, when I first started practicing here, it was voters registration. And that's how they picked the jurors. And they changed it to licenses to get a more diverse, to have more people and to make the pool more diverse. And I think that's saying something too, because of course we have more people with driver's license than we do have registered voters. Now, I wish that was not the case, but maybe you can do something about that in the coming season. But I think probably one of the most important reasons is that when you go in there, you feel comfortable, because when the jury is being selected or the panel comes in, it reflects your community.
Appreciate it. Can you put up number 4? Number 4, the exemptions. Go to the next one, exemptions. Yes. That's it? Okay. You all share that for me. Talk about the exemptions. Ms. Bernstein mentioned some of them earlier, but talk about the exemptions from jury duty. Ms. Robinson.
Well, I'm looking at this first one. It says people. I'm looking at the first one. It says people over the age of 70 up to age 72 in some jurisdictions may request an age exemption from jury service, but may serve if they choose. I am not so sure about that one. You may be called for jury duty more than once, but would not be required to serve on a jury more than once in a 12-month period in the same court. And what that means is that if you actually served on a jury, not that you were called and you didn't get picked, but if you were called and you actually got picked and served on a jury, then you are exempt for the next year from serving on a jury.
The other thing, and we see this a lot in Miami, if English is not your first language, but you're comfortable in English, but you're not so comfortable that you can understand every spoken word 100%. And that also means that when a witness is being cross-examined, and so there's a lot of back and forth with the witness, a lot of legal terms that are being used. So we see that quite often. We have jurors who want to serve, and they're very anxious to serve. And their English is strong, but it's not 100%. Often we'll ask them to measure it, and it's 70 or 80%. So that's one of the most important things that we see in Miami. The other thing we see a lot of is, and I don't know if this is recent, but we have a lot of people that have back problems, and they can't sit for a long time. And so we'll tell them, you can get up after an hour, 45 minutes. If you need to stretch at any point, we'll allow you to do that. So if you find yourself with any of those difficulties, please don't let that stop you from serving. Just let the judge know whatever accommodation you may need. And so long as it's not disruptive, meaning requires you to leave the courtroom, then the judge can accommodate you. If you have hearing or sight problems, often we can accommodate you with that. I've had many jurors who have had hearing problems. We just move them as close as possible to the witness stand, if it's feasible. But you should let the judge know, and they can often accommodate you. Sometimes we have people that are on medication, and it affects their ability to process things. So obviously, that's a legitimate reason. Or we've had people who take medication, it makes them tired. They can't sleep at night, so they can't get a full night's rest, so therefore they can't be positioned the next morning to process the complexities sometimes of the testimony. And if you've been convicted of a crime, you can't serve unless, and actually I had a gentleman on my last jury who was selected to serve. He had been convicted in federal court, but he had his rights restored, so he served. And so if you have your rights restored, you can serve.
There is one more thing. It says deferrals, but in Chapter 40, it says that a person may be excused from jury service upon a showing of hardship, extreme inconvenience, or public necessity. An example of hardship could be that you are the caretaker for your elderly mother and you cannot get anyone else to care for her. You may be an owner of self-employed, and you are the employment. You don't have any employees. So if you don't work, you don't eat, which will probably get us into something else about payment, but we're not there yet for jurors. But those are ways that you may be exempt from jury duty.
And that actually leads us to our other question, our third question. If potential jurors, and I'll have this question for Mr. Weeks. If potential jurors have to work and would lose money if they have to sit on a jury for days and even weeks, why isn't that a good enough reason to excuse those persons from serving? What's your opinion on that? Or thoughts?
Well, I'm glad we did the legal exemptions first. Because there are legal exemptions, but then there are excuses. And we hear a lot of excuses from people for not wanting to serve. And I understand that you have employment obligations, you have, this big project that's due at work, young people. Oh, I have to go to class. I don't want to miss any class. I got to go to work. I got to look for a job. My rent is due. There's a lot of excuses, life excuses. I get it. But the reality is service is important. You should at least come in and participate in the process. You are going to be called in a pool. It's a panel of prospective jurors. And the attorneys will then get an opportunity to ask further questions of you to determine whether you're suitable for that case. And in that process, if the attorneys conclude that your desire to be at work is probably going to have you distracted from this important case, they may not want you on that particular case, and they may make a motion to the judge in private to have you, released. But you should come and participate in the process, because in that participation, you may realize that project that due at work is important, but this service here in court is equally important. Because when you find yourself on a multi-million-dollar tobacco litigation trial, when you find yourself on a case that's going to change the outlook of how, folks may have access to hospitals or insurance, when you find yourself on cases where someone was hurt or someone may be looking at a substantial number of years in prison, that project at work may not be that important. Your employer may be able to give you some additional time. And you won't learn that until you come in and serve in the process. The process is important. So we recognize that everyone has life challenges. I have life challenges. I got kids, they got to go to school, they got tests, you need to brush their teeth in the morning. I get it. We all have the reality of life. But this is one of the most important duties you have to have a functioning society. And that means we all have to give a little bit of ourselves in our personal life to sacrifice for the better good of all. So I'm going to urge you to put aside those excuses and come in. Let's be honest. You go to the mailbox, pull it open, you get that notice, your jury summons, and you say, oh, man, what can I do to get out of this? First thing that goes to your mind. You start calling everybody you know that may be an attorney that have been in jury duty. What can I say to get out? Do I have to go? That's what people do. And I'm encouraging you, and we're all encouraging you, to pause and don't do that. To embrace that responsibility and come down to the courthouse and participate. You may not have to serve, but your participation is important and vital to the function of the courts. Thank you.
Harold, same question.
Yeah, no, I mirror the same sentiments as Mr. Weeks. I'll tell you this, and I'm going to be blunt about this, and I'm sorry if it comes off inconsiderate. If you're a person of color in this country, there's no excuse. There's no excuse. This is the cost that so many people paid just for the simple fact, just so our privileged behinds, I didn't cuss in the church, just because, so our privileged selves can get in our cars, go to a courtroom, and be selected for a jury. Can you believe that not probably 70 years ago, maybe close to 100 years ago, people of color was not even afforded that basic right to serve on a jury, to vote. There was people that marched, there's people that bled, there were people that cried, there were people that were killed, murdered, hung up in trees, just so we, with our privileged selves, can get that notice in the mail and look up at the sky and say, oh Lord, right? It's the price of being in the United States of America. It's the price of us having a criminal justice system or a judicial system that works not just for some people, but for all people, right? And so there's no excuse. Look, I view these as just exceptions to the rule. Doesn't mean we have to do it. I can't tell you how many retired citizens, people that are 70 years of age or plus, we tell them. I picked the grand juries, and that's another thing that I want to briefly explain there. I picked the grand juries for our office. And you'll be surprised, there's so many 70-plus-year-old people who are excited to serve, right? Even students. Yes, you might be a student, but we need younger people too to serve because we need a different perspective and outlook. So you got to understand, there's no excuse. If you're a black person in America, there's no excuse. And when I'm up there, when I pick a grand jury and a black person or a person of color, they give me some of those excuses, I push it. I challenge them on it. And I let them know that we need you to serve. There's so many lives that have been lost just so you could have that right with your privileged self to sit in their condition and not want to be there. There's no excuse. There's no excuse. And so you have the standard jury system, what we have now, but also we have a grand jury system. And so here in the 17th Circuit, but throughout the state of Florida, in order for my office to pursue a first-degree premeditated case, murder case, or a first-degree case that's punishable by life, I have to submit it to a grand jury to make a decision. By law, I can't just create charge and say, we're going to charge you with a first-degree offense. We have to submit those. If it's punishable by life or murder or death, I have to submit it to a grand jury. So grand juries are convened for a 6-month term. So some of y'all want to complain about only serving for a day or a week. I have about 15 to 21 people who I bring in every Wednesday and Thursday for 6 months to make these determinations. And, I know Gordon will say it, Mr. Weeks will say it, and I know many of our defense attorneys will say it, you can indict a ham sandwich. Those are people that's never presented anything before a grand jury. And if you do it right, and we do it right, we follow the rules of evidence. Even though there's no defense attorney in there, we follow the rules. We don't enter evidence that might be prejudicial to that person. That's how we do it in the 17th Circuit. And this is important because we really need people from different cross-sections of our society to serve on these grand juries, to hold us accountable, to hold law enforcement accountable, to ensure that these persons' rights aren't being infringed upon. And so it may inconvenience you for a period of time or for a short period of time, but you got to understand there have been lives lost just so you could have the privilege to say no. And so it's important that you exercise this right. There's no excuse, in my opinion. If you can get up and get in your car and go to the mall or go to the next or movie or go to a show, you can take your happy self to the courthouse and serve on a jury. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to stop before I say something and y'all kick me out the church. Sorry.
Thank you for that. All right. So, what are some of the most unusual reasons or excuses that you have heard from persons trying to get off jury duty that didn't work, Judge Robinson? I've been in, my first trial was in front of Judge Robinson, so we've heard a few.
I have two that strike me. The first one is they cannot judge because of their religion. I know Matthew too. Judge not lest you be judged. But let me tell you something. We judge every day, and that's what I tell them. We look at something, we say, we don't like her hair. What kind of clothes is she wearing? There's no such thing as you don't judge people. And you never got off of jury duty in my courtroom because your religion did not allow you to judge folks. The other thing is I had a gentleman come in and he was just silent, a young black male. He was the very first juror in the box. I started, the way I do it in my courtroom, I ask questions first and then I allow the attorneys to ask questions. I'm asking him questions, he's just sitting there and he's silent. So the gentleman next to him says, Judge, I don't think he speaks English. He had come in with a friend. His friend was sitting in the audience. So I looked at his friend and I said, does this person speak English? He said, yes, ma'am. So he's just sitting there and he thinks that if he doesn't say anything, we will assume that he doesn't speak English and therefore he would be exempt from jury duty. So he didn't get out of jury duty. In fact, he got picked to be on the jury. So those are two instances in the I can't judge because of my religion. I heard that all the time, but it never worked, not in my courtroom.
Judge Brinkley?
So in addition to those two, and we always get, I can't judge because of my religion. And so what I tell them is, oh, you're not judging people, you're just judging the facts. And then they're like, okay, so maybe. So the two that I've had is one, a young black man, he must have been in his early 20s, and he too was very silent. So I also thought, maybe he doesn't speak English. So we brought him up privately to engage. Sir, have you been following everything? No, not really. Did you understand the constitutional principles? I don't know. Can you follow the law? Maybe. So now I'm wondering, okay, maybe there's some competency issues. How far did you go in school? Oh, I graduated from college. Oh, what's your major? Criminal justice. Oh, so is there a reason why you weren't following? Yeah, I just don't care. Just not interested, don't care. So, another judge probably would have made him come back and made him sit. I'm not that kind of judge, but I did sit there with him for at least the next 20 minutes talking about the sorts of things that we're talking about. So hopefully the next time he gets selected, he'll be more engaged, more involved. Neither sides wanted him because he was tuned out, but it was very saddening to see. So that, and then I've had a few people who are just like, I can't sit because I'm just an unfair person. That's just who I am. Someone clearly had told them that that's the best answer because everyone agrees you don't want people who say they can't be impartial. But people seem to think that's a good answer. And they're all bad answers. And, you know, we've already talked long enough about how selfish that is. So those are my experiences.
I've had a number of excuses that the other jurors laugh at. One, the English thing is always something that's prevalent in South Florida. Everybody tries to use it, whether it's Hispanic, some Jamaicans. I can't do that, man. So you got to be very careful how you handle people and questioning them because you're using it as an excuse. Because as soon as you say you can go home, everybody rises. They get up. They know English to get home. I've had a young lady who told me, young black female, recently, that she could not serve because she had to take care of her elderly parents. So I asked, how old is mom? She said 55. How old is dad? 58. And I looked around and I asked loudly, where is there a rock? Can somebody give me a rock? You just can't use certain things in a court of law and think it's going to excuse you. She ended up being picked, and she was actually foreperson of the jury, and she loved it. Loved it, because I convinced her 55-year-old mama can take care of herself. She's still taking care of you and buying you, because she wasn't working. So it's interesting. The next one was an uninsured unemployed guy. I knew he was unemployed. But he started telling me about his mom being in the hospital again recently. And I said, okay, fine. Everybody's, concerned about that. I'm going to excuse him. I just need to know what hospital. He said, I don't know. I said, well, tell me, where's the hospital located? Because I grew up here in Broward County. I graduated from Dillard High School. I know every hospital. I represented the North Broward Hospital District for years. What hospital so I can make a phone call? I don't know. Give me your mama's cell number. I don't know that either. Well, sit down. You can't use certain things because everybody's listening. And as judges, we want to make sure that that fire is not set. Because once you allow someone to walk out because they got an elderly mama at 55, then my mama 56. I got to go. So you don't want that, or I can't speak English. Not tell them I don't speak English well either. But can you understand what's going on? That's really, can you understand? And how much do you understand? So you got to walk a fine line. But I've heard everything. A pimp came in and said, I pimp. So you probably make more money than I am. Hello. You can't use an excuse like that and expect people to say, okay, fine, you got to go home. That's not going to happen, not in my courtroom. And the religion thing, when I asked what church you attend, no. And you don't have to go to church, I understand that. A very prominent baseball player who remained anonymous, very, very famous, said, I do it at home. And he was basically the home run king and Mr. October, hint, hint. He didn't believe in going to church, so I understand that. But if you're going to say something like that, tell me where is it in the Bible? Where is it? What's the basis for it? What religion are you? And you can't really ask that unless you do it like privately. So you got to be careful about what you heard to use in certain courtrooms because you end up serving on the jury. Let me take one personal privilege. And it could be Ms. Foreman or Ms. Bernstein. How long is a person allowed or summoned, subpoenaed for jury duty?
How long?
How long? What is the subpoena? What does the subpoena say? The period. The period of time.
Oh, it's just 1 day.
1 day. That's what the subpoena says. It's 1 day if you're not, what? Chosen. If you're not picked, you go home that day. But we have to tell you this is a 5-day trial. Most trials are going to be 3 to 5 days. The tobacco cases, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I had a 6-week trial. I had a dependency trial when I was younger. I had black hair. I had a washboard. I don't have that no more. But anyway, all right, I'm gonna stop. Next question.
The next question is, if there's a problem in getting people to serve on juries, why not just have cases tried by judges alone, otherwise known as bench trial? Wouldn't that be more efficient? Gordon, that question's for you. We all know Gordon's all about the jury.
I thought I was going to get to tell some stories about some of the stuff I've seen in court. I'm going to do that too. Bench trials are incredibly important. Judges are judges of the law. They are students of the law. They're attorneys. They're matriculated to the highest ranks of our profession, and they rule on the law. But we need people with diverse backgrounds, with diversity of income, diversity of where they live, diversity of their education, diversity of who they hang out with, their ideas, their likes, to come in to be jurors. And with that diversity, you have a clearer understanding of the facts, because it's 6 people. that are going to get back there in the jury room and deliberate. And that's a secret process, but sometimes you hear raised voices. Sometimes you hear consensus building. But that process then is the process of justice. It's that give and take that, oh, I don't remember she said it that way. I remember it this way. Or I don't think this person was believable because of this, but you know, you should think about that. And that's how you find the justice. The judge is going to come with one perspective of that opinion. And I think a diversity of minds is a much better resolution to facts than a singularity with the judge. But let me tell you this one story. I got to share this with you because it pained me, and it still pains me this day. You know, when you come in for jury duty, you come in as a group, sometimes a group of 20 people, and we're picking and selecting the jury process. And it all starts with the judge asking some background information about, you know, where do you work, you know, where do you go to school, where do you live, just to give the attorneys a little bit of information about you. And we went through that process. And I was representing a young man, early 20s, charged with a drug offense. This was back in the 80s. I'm old, I'm sorry. And the panel was not very diverse. There was one person of color on that panel, another young black male. And when they seated the jury panel, that other person of color in the courtroom sat back, crossed his legs, leaned back, folded his arms, and shut his eyes. As we're going through the process of asking questions, he sat there with his eyes closed. So me trying to be the savvy attorney, I'm thinking maybe he's thinking very deeply about what he's hearing in court, until we heard him snore. And when you are sitting in the jury process, what message does that send to your fellow prospective jury persons when the only minority that's on that panel does not give any care about what's going on for another minority that's being charged in that court system? I did not know what to do. I felt the pain of hundreds of years of oppression weighting on my shoulders, but I knew then that we needed to do something about our jury service, because that sent a message that I could not unring in those other juror members, that this person was not of any value because his fellow young black man did not care enough to pay attention in jury duty. He went to sleep on his call. That's what we see in court sometimes. It's the hurt, the pain, that we're trying to fight for justice, and we need y'all to help us. We need you to participate. And he didn't care enough to even keep his eyes open. We need you to serve. Thank you.
Hi, Change of Plans. How y'all doing? All right, next question. What are the consequences for ignoring the subpoena and not showing up for jury duty? And what are the consequences of not being truthful during jury selection?
Well, you know, I'll chime in on that. The consequences is, and a judge can choose, it's the judge's discretion in that moment. They can hold the person in contempt of court. They can impose a fine. They can give that person jail time. I think there was a juror in Florida not too long ago. He did something egregious. I can't remember exactly what he did, but it was so egregious that the judge imposed a 10-day jail sentence on the individual. So it's serious. If you get to that point where you're being belligerent, you're being mistruthful, or some of the examples that we heard from the judges over there, Judge Brinkley and Judge Robinson, it's purely to the discretion of the judge in that moment, and they can decide. I either impose the final, first hold that person in contempt. They have to have a contempt hearing in the moment. It's exactly right there in the moment. They can either impose a fine or confine that person in jail. In my time, the only time I've seen it done, they've been reprimanded into custody, and they just sit in a box with handcuffs on, and then they're there for about a couple of hours or so. But I've heard of stories where people have been jailed or fined because of being untruthful. Also, you're under oath, and you could potentially be subjected to prosecution for perjury if you perjure yourself on the record because they swear you in. So that's another consequence that could happen if you're mistruthful in a judicial proceeding.
I think that the state attorney covered it, but if you are in a trial where usually you get 6, in county you get 6 jurors plus an alternate. If you are in circuit court, you may get 6, depending on the crime, you would get 12, and you have your alternate. But you only need 6 in county, or 12, 6 or 12 in circuit to hear the case. So sometimes when you have a case, you may actually end up without an alternate. And therefore you stress the importance to those who are on those jurors that, you need to be here because we have just enough that we have what is required to hear the case. If I have an alternate and one juror doesn't show up, fine, we just move the alternate in there. But if you don't have an alternate, then that makes it very difficult, and you may have to declare a mistrial, which you don't want to do, because you don't want to start the case over again. So the consequences for a person who shows up when there are no alternates would probably be worse than one who doesn't show up, but there is an alternate.
Thank you. And for this final question, and we're all here tonight having an opportunity to educate the community, but what more can we do to educate and encourage our citizens to willfully appear for jury duty? Anyone?
I'm talking again, but you've got to stress the importance of jury duty to the community. So you need forums like this, because we really don't know that much about jury duty, and we don't know necessarily what happens if we don't show up. But I think all of us ought to know, as has been stated here before, that people fought, died, bled for the right to vote and the right to be on the jury, so that we would have people on the jury who reflected our communities. So we have to do what we're doing tonight. And we have to have the civics not only from us, the NBA, Judicial Council, and us here, we're doing what we need to do. But it needs to be done for the community. So not just here, have another one like this, but go to your schools, your churches, all your organizations, your sororities, the Kiwanis Club, the Key Club, whatever it is, we all should be pushing the importance of being a juror.
Yeah. I'm going to add to this, and I want to say this. I know people of color in the room, it's not just a black issue, right? This is an American issue. This country and the people in it, we're so contradictory, right? We claim to care about life, but we pass gun laws to just allow endless guns on the street, right? We claim to care about freedoms, but we want to legislate people's bodies, right? We claim to be a land of the free and a land of the brave and to care about our country and to be patriotic, but in the same breath, we'll get a notice about appearing for jury service, and we're mad. We don't want to do it, but the reason why we're mad is because we're afraid it's going to affect our livelihood. We're afraid that our boss, our employer, may hold it against us because we're exercising our God-given constitutional right. And so this is an American problem. It's an issue where we need to really stop being contradictory when we talk about these things that are our supposed inherent freedoms and inherent rights. You heard Mr. Weeks say earlier, and I say it all the time whenever I pick a grand jury or whenever I do pick a jury, is that serving on a jury is one of the utmost civic duties, except for serving in the military, right? That's how important it is. That's how important the forefathers, who we know they didn't care about any of us when they wrote it, but they believed that jury service, the right to jury trial, was an important constitutional right. But yet we have institutions in place, we have, our economic system in place where it doesn't incentivize us to exercise that right. So my point is, if you're in a position of power, if you're a business owner, our institutions in this country, we need to create a system, a society that's conducive, that allows us to exercise the right to serve on a jury, that exercises a right, to allow us to exercise the right to vote. We don't even get a day off for that, and that's supposed to be one of the major constitutional rights, but people still have to go to work. Election day should be a national holiday, right? And so it's a major issue. It's not just confined to the black community. It's an American issue. It's an American problem that we really need to have that serious discussion to get all institutions to comport, to encourage us to exercise these rights as well.
I'd also like to echo those points that were very, very clearly stated. But we need to try to embrace our business community. A lot of folks really consider work when it comes to that summons they receive in the mail. And they look at how their employer is going to judge their absence from work and their productivity at work and their livelihood, their ability to feed and take care of their family, and they balance that on whether or not they're going to serve in jury duty. Jury duty is not only the criminal aspect of the law, it's the civil aspect of the law. And we need to try to educate small business owners, large corporations, folks in academia, to understand that they get an incredible benefit when they have a diverse population serving on juries, because they're the ones that are going to be litigating issues. They're the companies that are going to need rulings favorably or unfavorably against them. They're the ones that are suing for millions and millions of dollars. And if folks feel oppressed and say, I got to worry about my kids and my ability to put a roof over their head and food in their mouth and clothes on their back, I can't take this time off. We need to have our business community be supportive and not have that weight on someone when they receive that jury service. So that is a real place we can focus some of this effort. That we will be in churches because our faith-based community understands the importance of service. That we're going to be in our civic organizations, our Greek organizations, all of the nonprofit organizations, because we understand the importance of service. We have to make sure we be just as vocal in our business communities to let them understand the importance of service, so we can take that pressure off of folks when they're choosing what are they going to put as a priority in their homes. Thank you.
Thank you all so very much. And we're going to transition, turn it over to the great Judge Robinson. You're amazing.
Your motion is denied. All right. We're coming to the end of the program, and I want to make sure that we cover most of the bases. Because of time, we cannot go any further with regard to the comments. Again, let's give everybody a great round of applause. I'm going to give my thank yous, and then we're going to call BSO up so you can hear what's going on and you can avoid these folk who are trying to scam you. I want to thank, first of all, again, Dr. Marcus D. Davison, the senior pastor of Newmont Olive. Our executive pastor, Frank Kennedy Jr. He outdresses me any day of the week. Our director of music, Kenny Smith, our technical director, Isaiah Blackman. Without those gentlemen, we cannot operate. Church administrator, she's not here tonight. She's gone to visit her mom, Sandra James. We did have Eugene Pettis on the program, but he has a death in the family. He had to go to a funeral. We also had federal judge Rodney Smith. He had to go see his daughter run track, I think in Detroit, so he couldn't be here tonight. I want to thank all the participants, including our chair, Judge Kimberly Edmonds Adams of Atlanta. Also, you hear from Sharon Burrell, the chair of this committee. Again, she's in Rockville, Maryland. Rodney Baltimore of Hot 105, he had us on radio. I think Mr. Baltimore may have left, but he was in the back. Burley Rosa, the executive director of Broward County Bar Association. Ms. Rosa helped us with everything to put this program together. Alexia Hudson, she's with the baby. Again, president of the TJ Rated Bar Association, all of the NBA members of the Judicial Council. And there are other thank yous that I have to render, but let me say we have something special going on in Broward. Obviously, we have the Broward clerk of courts. As she said, she keeps everything straight, and without her, we could not operate. We have Judge Robinson. Without her, I couldn't operate. We have two gentlemen who get along, and we haven't had this relationship at all in Broward County, as far as I'm concerned. And the next time Gordon Weeks says he's old, I'm gonna bust him in the head. He's not old at all, talking about the 80s. To the white meat. That is a joke. That's a joke. Got to say that. The man who said it initially is gone, but it was a joke. The state attorney and the public defender, they are arch enemies. One prosecutes, the others defend. They defend the people he's prosecuting, but they get along beautifully. And they've gone to Tallahassee together. They've done things that we don't have time to cover, but both Mr. Weeks and Mr. Pryor, they've changed the way Broward County is functioning and their offices. So be proud of them. Be proud of them. Judge Brinkley, she's always in Broward. I thought she lived in Broward. Anyway, we've been on I've been on a lot of panels with this young lady, and she's dynamite. You can see her on TV all the time. We're going to have now Broward Sheriff's Office. Please come up. Mr. Olson. We're going to go to, no, you come on. Mr. Olson's going to talk to you and teach you. We have judges leaving, Funderstock and Frank. I see you. It ain't too dark out back there. Judge Odom, you should have helped him. You should have helped him and kept him seated. Can we now, do you want the PowerPoint? You want the PowerPoint now?
That'd be fantastic.
Okay, let's cue it up. We're ready. Thank you.
Very much.
Okay, is Captain or Major?
I'm just a detective.
Detective
I
Olson?
really scammed today. I'm in office hours, I'm seeing 40 patients, and I come back to my desk, I leave my phone on my desk between patients, and
That was just an audio from a slide that's coming up in a second. We're going to make this quick. My name is Detective Rich Olson with the Broward Sheriff's Office. I got a couple of my colleagues back here also that we work on some of these fraud cases. Recently in Broward County, and actually across the entire U.S., we had one specific fraud that was targeting not actual people that were summoned for. I'm sorry about that. Sorry about that. A fraud that was targeting any citizen. This was not specific to people that were actually summoned for jury duty. And the fraud kind of worked a little bit like this. The bad guys, very skilled, very organized and sophisticated fraudsters, would identify a segment, a target audience that they thought would probably be the best to victimize. They would do their intelligence, just like any of us would do. If we have a worker coming over or something like that, we do a little background check on somebody. They did all of their reconnaissance, intelligence, and everything on a particular victim. And with that information, they would get their address, their name, their phone number, their employment, and end up putting a phone call into someone saying, pretending that they were law enforcement, and telling this person that they had a warrant for their arrest for missing jury duty. And it was a lot more specific than that. These guys used sophisticated equipment as far as populating their phone number, so when they called you, it said Broward Sheriff's Office with the real Broward Sheriff's Office. They did their research to identify names of actual Broward Sheriff's Office employees. So they would be able to call you and say, hey, this is Captain Brown with the Broward Sheriff's Office. I want to inform you you have a warrant for your arrest. Also, they were familiar with police lingo, and we all know how cops talk, at which time they exited the residence and, that whole kind of thing. And so they used all that lingo. They were familiar with some court testimony type terminology, whether it was made up, but it definitely sounded official. They would threaten the person that they had a warrant for their arrest, and I'm sure we've all gotten scam calls like this before. And if we could go to slide 2 on the PowerPoint. And it's very similar to how a lot of other fraud activities call. I'm sure everyone in this room has gotten some type of call, oh, you didn't pay your taxes, or there's some other Social Security thing that you have a warrant for. But this is essentially a short synopsis on how these guys operated. And they were very successful through their technology, through their doing research on their targets. And I'm being a little brief here, but I'm going to play that next video. It's a TikTok video.
Quick PSA,
there you
because
go.
I nearly got really scammed today. I'm in office hours, I'm seeing 40 patients, and I come back to my desk, I leave my phone on my desk between patients, and I see that I have a missed call, and I have a voicemail from someone at the Morris County Sheriff's Department. It says there's an urgent matter, I need to call them back, so of course, I drop everything, I call them back, and it's this very reputable man telling me that I missed jury duty on June 5th. I was chosen as an expert witness based on my occupation, and there basically is a warrant out for my arrest. The case has been postponed because I did not show up for jury duty. They have my correct mailing address and they have my cell phone number. Scary. So I'm like freaking out. I tell my office manager, like, I have to go to the sheriff's office. They need me to sign some paperwork, and they need to basically expedite the process of getting me off the hook for this warrant for my arrest. So we cancel my last few patients, and I'm getting ready to go to the sheriff's office. I'm still on the phone with them. They keep putting me on and off hold. And then finally they come back and they say something about how I can't actually come to the sheriff's office with an active warrant for my arrest, and that they need me to basically get a bond of $7,000 to get me off the hook here. Red flag, red flag. I'm like, hold on a second. Let me call my lawyer. So I call my lawyer and he's like, hang up the phone. They made this seem so real. They did like some verification call where they called me from the actual number of the sheriff's office. They gave me a case number. They gave my office manager some information, the address of the sheriff's office, which was correct, and a phone number to call back, which was verified. So crazy. So I ended up calling the real sheriff's office finally, spoke to them, gave them the story, and they said that this has been happening, and especially to professionals who aren't too privy on the way the law works, AKA doctors. So moral of the story, be careful, because these guys are actually pretty good. I mean, maybe I just sound like someone who's naive, but they nearly had me.
It is, I'll slow down a little bit now. It was very sophisticated. These guys would get, in our particular case here in Broward County, they targeted female doctors. Every one of our victims was a female medical professional with a license. They used some of that against them as far as explaining to them that if you don't respond to the courthouse and take care of this, you will be arrested. We will suspend your license through the Department of Health. So they knew all of the lingo, and it's not unusual for doctors or healthcare professionals to receive subpoenas, whether it's, there's insurance investigations or other things like that. So the doctors did begin to question, maybe we did get a subpoena. They did know my home address. They do know my phone number. They do know where I work. And they also specifically indicated that these were civil cases, not criminal. So it took some of the suspicion off of the victims, where they are often involved, the doctor's offices and practices are often involved in civil litigation. So through their ability to have the sheriff's office deputies' names, use their phone number, use court-affiliated and police-affiliated lingo, and the threats, of course, of you may lose your license, and the judge, they would use judges' names and say, Judge Smith ordered a make and maintain contact order. If you hang up during this phone call, we are going to assume that you're uncooperative, and we will immediately deploy the fugitive unit to your house or your office, and we will take you into custody. It worked, and I guess just, if there's any fishermen in the room, you throw enough lines in the water, at some point you're going to catch a fish. And so they were able to lure them. These guys even were so sophisticated that they would deploy some of their co-conspirators to Broward County and all the other areas in the country to do some surveillance. They would not ask the person to pay them money. What they would do is say, we're partnered with a bond agency, and through that bond agency, we will be able to nullify your active warrant. But you have to go meet this bond agent. He will provide you with a receipt. They will then send the paperwork over to our office. We will nullify that, and you'll be on the clear. And this is the most efficient and effective and speedy way for you to nullify this warrant, and then everything will be good. They actually would sometimes hang up with a person. The victim would call back. These suspects recorded the sheriff's office outgoing mail, voicemail. So the message would say, "Thank you for calling the Broward Sheriff's Office. If this is an emergency, please call 911. It was the actual BSO voicemail. So they were very, they had the ability to convince some victims that this was a legitimate warrant. We had some of the victims actually went to the bank. They took out between $5,000 and $10,000. One victim took out $20,000. They got her twice, and paid a cash bond to who they thought was a bondsman. Looked like he came out of a bondsman's office, but he actually was just parked on the side waiting for the victim to come, because one bad guy group that was working the phones was communicating with the bad guy group who was at the bondsman's office. And it worked. In the 4 or 5 days that they were here in Broward County, they made about $50,000. We followed them to Dallas a couple days later, where they made about $65,000 in 3 days. And as this unfolded, we realized, and you can start flipping through some of these PowerPoints. I'm sorry about that, guys. And through all that, we realized that these guys operated throughout the country. We were fortunate where we all know a lot of these cases, they don't get investigated because there's so little information that the victim has or the police officers are able to obtain from police reports. But my sergeant's a little persistent. So we dug into this. Between the two of us, we probably wrote 15, maybe 20 search warrants, all of these for phones. And what we would find out is the first phone number that they called the victim on was actually a secondary phone. They had multiple layers of drop phones, and each of them was a voice over IP. So it's not like it was a Comcast or AT&T or Verizon. It was just a Google Voice number, which is basically anonymous. And they layered that multiple times, made it almost impossible. We got a couple of lucky breaks. Some other agencies throughout the country, each were able to have a couple pieces of this puzzle. We put it together, and we did end up making one arrest in this case. And we're very much looking, and I think that there was, I don't know, maybe 20 counts of extortion, the grand theft and so on. And the extortion is because of the threats. If you don't pay the sheriff's office, you're going to lose your license, you're going to get arrested, and so on. And like I said, they were successful. They got a lot of cash. We were able to make an arrest. But if you go to the PowerPoint that on the top, it says fraud warning signs in red. I think it's the second to last page. Part of the reason that I think that the sheriff's office was invited here is we all know the warning signs. We've all received probably calls similar to this, but the importance of reminding ourselves, reminding our family, reminding our friends and neighbors that well, take just the jury duty, for example. No law enforcement officer or court representative is ever going to call and say, could you please give me cash or else you're going to get in trouble. Never going to happen. And all the jury summons actually come through the mail. None of them come through email. The clerk of the court's office is not going to call you and say you have jury duty. It's going to be a written summons that comes through USPS. Sometimes these guys try to adjust their, because cash makes everybody a little sketchy, they're suspicious of it. Sometimes they change the gift cards or money orders, or you got to go to Western Union and send this money in. Anybody that's demanding money from you right now, it's a scam. And it doesn't matter if it's jury duty or hey, your nephew is in jail in Colorado or whatever it is. So those are some of the warning signs if you're on the phone with these guys.
What is your telephone number? After they hang up with the scammers?
After they hang up with the scammers, on the last page, and you can put up the last page now. It has the information for the sheriff's office, non-emergency numbers. It has a resource for the website, which has reporting activity on there. But the most important thing is vigilance. And our friends, our neighbors, these guys, I am telling you, we listened to some of the recorded phone calls in this. They sounded like cops. The guy was outside a bail bondsman office. The whole partnership thing, I spoke to Judge Smith, and I tried to get this squashed, but I wasn't able to. You're going to have to pay. Unfortunately, you're going to get a receipt. All the paperwork's going to be there. And sometimes, unfortunately, it works, but we can, through this community event, stop some of this. Just within the past 6 months, the sheriff's office has had at least 10 attempts of the same exact fraud, none of them successful. So that's good news. Bad news that they're still happening because they're going to spin off. The guys that get arrested, their friends are going to learn about it, then they're going to do it. So it's just going to be a continuing spin-off. But vigilance with friends, neighbors, community, everyone else is the way that this gets combated and defeated. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you, Judge. Appreciate it, sir.
Any of us could be a victim. So look at the warning signs. Take that number down. Get multiple numbers, because it doesn't have to be jury duty scam. It could be any scams, any fraud. Call them, hang up, call them, call your lawyer. Don't call me. Call somebody else. But don't lose out on telling mom, dad, your relatives, your children, because they're basically making everybody victim if you're vulnerable. It appears to be legitimate. We're now here from Judge Burrell.
Good evening. I am Judge Sharon Burrell. I'd like to thank everyone who participated tonight in such an amazing and important program. Special thanks to New Mount Olive Baptist Church for hosting the event, to our partners in this program, our panelists who are experienced attorneys and judges, the clerk of the court, the sheriff's office, members of the Judicial Council Outreach Committee, and most importantly, thank you to Judge Michael A. Robinson, who took the idea of Judicial Council Chair Judge Kimberly Esmond Adams and ran with it. Judge Robinson is a member of the Outreach Committee, and at our very first meeting, when Judge Adams discussed her vision of a jury forum, Judge Robinson stepped up and volunteered to organize the first forum that was held tonight. Judge Robinson spoke passionately about the importance of jury duty and the effect on our communities when juries are not diverse. After tonight's program, I hope that members of the community who joined us either in person or virtually will recognize how important it is to serve. Everyone has an obligation to serve. I've been a judge for almost 15 years on the Circuit Court for Montgomery County, Maryland, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. Since I've been a judge, I've been called 3 times for jury duty, and I've gone 3 times. The Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court lives in my jurisdiction, and he was called for jury duty. He came. He came with federal marshals, but he came. So the next time you receive a jury summons, don't be upset. Don't try to think of reasons why you can't come, and don't blow up the clerk's phone. Instead, step up and sit down. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Have a good night.
Thank you all for coming. We have students actually from Nova Law School here. Will you stand? Appreciate it. They're actually interning at the courthouse. We have Judge Odom again. Stand, Judge Odom. Are there any other judges here? I know some had to leave. Okay. Okay. Okay, I got you. General Magistrate Robinson, will you please stand? Any other general magistrates? All right. Members of Alpha Phi Alpha, you know that was coming. Members of Alpha Phi Alpha, will you please stand? Stop. We don't have that now. We're going to stop right there. That was Jonathan Allen back there? Brother Allen? Okay, appreciate it. I couldn't make out. We don't have any, we got water, but we don't have any desserts for you. I want to thank you all for coming. I do have a telephone number. What you got? Okay, those for those folk who are registering, okay, make sure you register to vote. One of the things that we believe in, vote by mail for that. Oh, that's a form, vote by mail? Okay, make sure you vote. All of you are encouraged to come back on Sunday. Is it Sunday? Who's preaching Sunday? Okay, no problem. Okay, we're gonna have Pastor gonna preach. Everybody's invited to come to New Mount Olive for a service, and that's the 8 o'clock service or the 10:45 service. Everybody is invited to come, and we're gonna basically praise and worship Jesus Christ. Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you. Please say thank you to the baby. She kept us honest. Thank you for all the panelists. We will use you in the future. I can't tell you when, but this is dynamic. Did you learn something tonight? This is dynamic. These are your experts. And to those who are on YouTube and Zoom, those of you who are outside this state, and those of you who are in the Panhandle otherwise, I appreciate you. Thank you for tuning in. We're on YouTube, Facebook, and any other means that you're appearing. Thank you. God bless you.